What's the secret to landing your dream job, and are you willing to pay the price for it? Because the answer might surprise you.
Well, it's not just about having the right skills or experience, but also about being willing to think outside the box and take risks that others might not be willing to take.
That's a great point, and it's interesting because most learners get the concept of risk-taking completely wrong, thinking it's just about being reckless, but it's actually about being strategic and calculated.
Exactly, and when you're trying to land your dream job, you need to be on the same page as the company and understand their needs and values, which can be a challenge, but it's worth it in the long run.
Absolutely, and speaking of the long run, it's also important to consider the fact that most successful people have had to burn the midnight oil at some point in their careers, putting in extra hours and effort to achieve their goals.
That's true, and it's not just about working hard, but also about working smart and being able to cut to the chase, getting straight to the point and avoiding unnecessary distractions.
Here's the weird part, though many people think that they need to have it all figured out before they start, but the truth is that you can learn as you go and make adjustments along the way, which is where the phrase, "think outside the box," really comes into play.
Yes, and it's also important to remember that you don't have to do it alone. You can pull out all the stops and gather a team of people who can help and support you, which can make a big difference in the long run.
That's a great point, and it's also important to consider the fact that most companies are looking for people who are willing to take initiative and come up with creative solutions, which is where the phrase "pay the price" comes in.
Exactly, and when you're willing to pay the price and put in the effort, you're more likely to be successful and achieve your goals, which is why it's so important to be on the same page as the company and understand their needs and values.
Here's the weird part, though many people think that they need to be perfect and have all the answers, but the truth is that it's okay to make mistakes and learn from them, which is where the phrase "burn the midnight oil" really comes into play.
Yes, and it's also important to remember that you don't have to have all the answers. You can just cut to the chase and get straight to the point, which can be a big relief and help you to achieve your goals.
Now, let's talk about what it means to really think outside the box and come up with creative solutions, because this is an area where most learners get it completely wrong.
Well, thinking outside the box means being willing to challenge assumptions and try new things, which can be uncomfortable, but it's often necessary for growth and success.
That's a great point, and it's also important to consider the fact that thinking outside the box is not just about being creative, but also about being practical and finding solutions that work.
Exactly, and when you're able to think outside the box, you're more likely to come up with innovative solutions that can help you to stand out and achieve your goals.
Here's the weird part, though many people think that they need to be naturally creative in order to think outside the box, but the truth is that it's a skill that can be learned and developed over time.
Yes, and it's also important to remember that thinking outside the box is not just about individual creativity, but also about being able to work with others and come up with collective solutions.
Now, let's summarize some of the key points we've discussed so far, because it's time to pull out all the stops and make sure we're on the same page.
Well, we've talked about the importance of paying the price, thinking outside the box, and burning the midnight oil, as well as the need to be on the same page and cut to the chase.
Exactly, and it's also important to remember that these phrases are not just individual concepts, but are interconnected and can be used together to achieve success.
That's a great point, and it's also worth noting that these phrases are not just limited to career development, but can be applied to other areas of life as well.
Here's the weird part, though many people think that they need to use these phrases in a specific way, but the truth is that they can be adapted and used in a variety of contexts.
Yes, and it's also important to remember that the key to using these phrases effectively is to be authentic and genuine, rather than just trying to use them as a formula or technique.
Now, let's talk about today's challenge, because it's time to put what we've learned into practice and make it real.
Well, today's challenge is to use one of the phrases we've discussed in a sentence, and to share it with us in the comments below.
Exactly, and the phrase I want to use is "think outside the box," because it's a phrase that has really helped me to come up with creative solutions and achieve my goals.
That's a great choice, and I'm sure our viewers will have some great examples of how they've used this phrase in their own lives.
Absolutely, and it's been great discussing these phrases with you, Michael, and exploring how they can be used in real-life situations.
If you enjoyed this conversation, subscribe for daily English practice, and join us tomorrow when we'll be discussing the topic of leadership and management.
And tomorrow, we'll be talking about the secret to being a successful leader, and the one thing that most people get wrong when it comes to managing a team, so be sure to tune in for that.